What are the barriers in your life to praise and worship? What are the barriers inside you that would keep you from this praise, this joy of the Lord bursting forth, coming out of you and spreading contagious to other people? Yeah, sin, doubt, pride, negativity. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Now, look back at Psalm 96. The basis for praise is this. Look at the entire chapter, scan through it quickly. Can you find a single I in there? It's not there, is it? Can you find a single woe is me? Not one. Right? What does that tell us about praise and worship? Yeah, that it's an absence of praise and worship is an absence of me. It's the presence of God and an absence of me. Does that make sense? I'm not the focus, God is. Right? It's praise and worship has to do with God being our focus. When we take our eyes off ourselves, we take our eyes off our problems, we take our eyes off negativity of evil around us, right? And we're focused on God. That's when praise happens. That's when this jubilance, this energy, this excitement happens about God. So let me ask you this. What's your focus? What is your focus? To give God the glory and praise he deserves. Ascribe to him the glory and praise he deserves. Starts with you and I focused on him, not ourselves, not on things around us. Let's look at Psalm 96 and the content of it. If you recognize Psalm 96, Psalm 96 is a section of a song that David gave to Asaph, his chief musician, when he was bringing the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem for the first time, when David was doing that. It's a piece of that. 1 Chronicles 16, if you have your Bibles, turn there. It's really nice when we know where the psalm came from, because many, if not most of the ones, we don't know the story or history behind it, but this one we do. I think Tom was being particularly kind to me by giving me one that has easy history behind it, just to teach on. 1 Chronicles 16. So I'll give you the context here, but look at verse 7. Let's read this verse. It says, that day David gave to Asaph and his fellow Levites this song of thanksgiving to the Lord. Now, there's a lot in this song here that is not in Psalm 96. Psalm 96 actually picks up in verse 23 and then goes to verse 33. So there's words before it and after it that are the complete song. Psalm 96 is only the middle section of that. But let me talk a little bit about the Ark of the Covenant and why that's important. How many people saw Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark? Okay, great. If you were around in the 80s or 90s, that you probably saw it, Raiders of the Lost Ark. And Indiana Jones is looking for this historical box that did actually exist, right? There's a lot of history that shows that. And in the movie, he's in quest to find it, and it had been lost at some point. So we'll get to that in a little bit. So the Ark of the Covenant. So the Ark of the Covenant was built under Moses' direction when God gave specific instructions to Moses to build the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant had some unique things about it. It was a very ornate box that was overlaid in gold. It had rings on its corners so that human hands would not have to touch it. It was that holy, right? Because it represented God's holiness. The rings would hold rods, big long rods. They were put through the rings, and the rods were overlaid with gold. And so the people could pick up the Ark of the Covenant with the rods without having to touch the box itself. Anybody remember what was in the Ark of the Covenant? What three things were kept in there? Aaron's rod was one. Manna. And the tablets, the stone tablets. Interesting, if you look at those, if you do a study of all three of those things, they all point to Jesus. which is really, really cool. Yeah, just think about that. The staff that blossomed came to life, right? The stone tablets that were the law, and Jesus was the fulfillment of the law, right? And the manna, where Jesus came and said, I am the bread of life, right? All of that, yeah. So it's pretty cool. But this Ark of the Covenant, when it was built and when they started using it, the place that it had in the column of people as they went through the wilderness was the front. It was where it was carried. It was out front. So if you're behind the column and you're looking forward, what you see is the Ark of the Covenant. What you see is that being carried. That's what was carried visibly up front. And the Ark of the Covenant represented God's faithfulness. It represented God's protection, represented God's power. When they finally went into the Promised Land, do you remember what they carried around Jericho? In the front, it was the Ark of the Covenant, right? It was used in battle to demonstrate God's power. When they crossed the Jordan, the first thing that they carried across the Jordan, the Ark of the Covenant, right? And what happened to the Jordan? Yeah, it split. The water started piling up way upstream, right? That's the power of God, right? And so the Ark of the Covenant to the Israelites was a symbol of God's presence. It was a symbol of who he was, of who his person was. The book of Revelations tells us that the Ark of the Covenant is patterned after God's temple in heaven. Think about that. You want to have some imagery of what God's temple in heaven is like, start with the Ark of the Covenant. There's so much you can do with that. Well, there was a dark time that happened with the Ark of the Covenant. We know that it was captured during a battle at the time of Eli. Do you remember Eli? Eli was the prophet, the priest at the time of Samuel, when Samuel was a little guy, right? That's Eli. And Eli, during his time as a judge, Israel went to battle and they lost the Ark of the Covenant. I don't know the details. I'm not sure that we know the details of how it was lost. We just know that it was captured. It was captured by the Philistines, the enemies of Israel. Interesting things that happened with the Ark of the Covenant. When it was captured, they took it to their capital, Ashdod. They took it to their capital, and they put it in the temple of their god, Dagon, D-A-G-O-N. You can read about this in 1 Samuel 4, 1 Samuel 6, 7, 21. It's all in there. And they set it up the first night. They have the Ark of the Covenant in the temple next to their big, giant statue of their god, Dagon. And they come back the next morning, and Dagon's on his face. Boom. Right? Like as if something knocked him over. And, of course, something did knock him over. Right? They set it up the next day, came back on his face, but not just on his face, broken. Broken before the Ark of the Covenant. Now think about that. Think about what that means in terms of power, what that means in terms of God being the only God. Right? The symbolism in there is so rich. The Philistines didn't learn, though. A plague started, right? And a plague was so bad in the capital city that they got rid of the Ark of the Covenant and sent it to another one of their cities. They didn't get it out of the Philistine territory. They sent it to Ekron. And then they sent it to Gash. I forget the name, one of the other cities. But the plague lasted for 7 months in the Philistines before they well, maybe we should get rid of the Ark of the Covenant. Right? People dying, right? Like, here's a question, though. How long does something destructive have to be in your life before you get rid of it? Philistines, deceived by whatever, who knows what, but 7 months is a long time to have a plague. Yeah. We know all about that, don't we? So they sent the Ark of the Covenant back into Israeli territory, just barely across the border. They sent it, I think an oxen was pulling it. They sent it in an and the Israelites don't know what to do with it. The Ark of the Covenant that was lost came back to them, and they don't know what to do with it. And it ends up staying in a farm town for 20 years. Saul neglects it, doesn't do anything about it. David finally says, hey, it's time. It's time to bring the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. After he captured Jerusalem, made Jerusalem the capital, moving it from Shiloh to Jerusalem, and he decided, hey, it's time to bring the Ark of the Covenant. So they plan this magnificent event to bring the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, where David would have a special tent for it. And they planned this celebration, this dancing and singing. And this is when David dances before the Ark of the Covenant, and his wife looks out the window and sees him dancing, and she gets all mad at him because he's dancing unrobed. That's part of that story of this. But it's this massive celebration of bringing what represented God to them, bringing God to Jerusalem, to their city, bringing God and his power, right? His might, his deliverance, bringing that God back into Jerusalem, back into their lives, where God would be the primary focus. Right? And so this psalm that we have, this singing that they did, this is all about that all of that history is wrapped up in this psalm. And it gives us that background. So when he talks about singing a new song, right, it's because this is a new event for them. This is God, the symbolism that represents God coming into Jerusalem. Talking about his salvation, talking about the wonders that he did, all of that, and how great God is. It's all tied into this. Now, one last thing on the Ark of the Covenant. Presumably, we don't know this, but in 587, when the Babylonians came in and captured Jerusalem for the last time, right, where they took the things out of Jerusalem, they took all the treasures. Remember, Jerusalem was sacked 3 different times in sequence by the Babylonians. Or is it 3 or 2? Well, anyway, 2 or 3 times it was sacked, and eventually, but the Babylonians took the treasures out of the temple and took them back. We don't have record of what happened to the Ark of the Covenant. There's some speculation that it was hidden in the catacombs underneath in Jerusalem. There's some speculation that it was carried off and hidden in other places before the Babylonian captivity, and in anticipation of that. Hence, the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark. They're trying to find the Ark of the Covenant, Indiana Jones, and it is entertaining, by the way. It has a little bit of truth in it. But that's what happened to the Ark of the Covenant. There are some that think that the next big event in the world timeline is going to be the discovery of the Ark of the Covenant. Again, it's not here, it's not here. I can't say that's going to happen or not, but there are those that believe that. So, back to Psalm 96. So the history is that. The inspiration for the Psalm 96 is that. Back to the feeling. Can you feel what's going on now? Why this is such a psalm of praise and worship about God's glory and his power and his deliverance. That's the background. Verses 1 through 3. Verses 1 through 3, there's 3 commandments here. There's 3 instructions that are given to us. Sing, proclaim, declare. Verse 1, sing. Verse 2, proclaim. Verse 3, declare. Sing to the Lord. Sing to the Lord a new song. The sense here is that it's this spontaneous breaking into song. There's this sense here that because of God's presence, because our eyes and ears that experience God's wonder, we break into song and we sing him a new song. I was reminded of this when the Truce team was here a couple weeks ago. The Nikki Cruz outreach, the Truce team from the Times Square Church. The hip-hop team, I was told this story. I didn't actually see it myself, but Donna Bender had made a meal, or had brought a meal down there, and when they found out that she had brought sticky buns, they just spontaneously broke into hip-hop about sticky buns. Just one person, and then another, and then another, and another, like that. It's just that spontaneous joy about eating sticky buns, right? I kind of get that sense here that it has that spontaneous feel to it. It says, sing to the Lord. Now this goes right along with what we're talking about, praise. The sing has to be to the Lord. Right? The focus is the Lord. Sing to the Lord. He has to be front and center, just like when the Israelites were walking through the wilderness and the Ark of the Covenant was out front. When they're walking, they look forward, they see that, right? Front and center. Sing to the Lord. That's the focus. It says, sing to the Lord a new song. Why a new song? What would the occasion be that somebody that has a relationship with God would sing to God a new song? What would be going on in their life that would be cause for a new song? Anyone? I'm sorry? Born again, perhaps? Something new, right? God lives with us in the present, right? He's with us now. He lives inside of us, right? So when he is living through us, living in us, providing for us, delivering us daily from trials, etc., that's now. That's fresh, right? That's right in the now. So singing to him a new song is that God is in my life in the present. He's active in the right and now. It's not just the rich history we have from the Bible or the rich history we have in our lives from him, but it's the fact that he's here right now. It could be reconciliation. Yeah, it could be. The question for you, is God active in your life right now? Is he active? Is he doing something in you right now? And if he's not, why not? Does that have anything to do with your choices? Because his desire is to be within us, active in our lives right now, in the present, guiding us, directing us, leading us, teaching us, shaping us, all of that. To sing to the Lord, all the earth. Tells us who should be singing. You think about that. Since God is the creator of all, if God is the Lord of all creations, all people, then who should be singing? All the earth should, right? All the earth should be singing. But are they? No, they're not. Sadly, the majority doesn't acknowledge God as God. Sadly, the majority of the earth does not, the world does not acknowledge that he is creator, that he has done the marvelous things that he's done, right? And that leaves the responsibility of telling his story to you and I, to the rest of this world. So who is going to tell this story? Who is going to sing his praises? Who is going to sing a new song about God to somebody that may not have heard of God or acknowledges God? Are you going to do that? It's your, as a creation, as a person created by God, who has God in them, who has a new song, who has the history, it's yours and my responsibility to do that. To tell the stories of the Bible, to sing praises about God, his salvation, his deliverance, his faithfulness in your life. How many times has God been faithful in your life? Right? Somebody said every day. An easy answer there, guys, is calculate how many days you've been alive, that you've got through the day. Right? That's God's faithfulness in your life. He proves himself faithful by getting us through each day. Right? I'm 48. 48 times, that's a lot of numbers. 48 times 350, that's a lot of days where God has been faithful in my life, getting me through. Right? Hasn't been a day yet that he hasn't been faithful. So the responsibility is on me to sing his praise. All the earth. Every person. Verse 2 says, praise his name or bless his name. In Hebrew culture, in Israel culture, the name of somebody told their story. It told who they were. So when it says bless his name or praise his name, it's talking about telling his story, saying who God is. You think of God, his name, the Lord. The word that we have, Lord, is translated Yahweh, meaning the I am, right? Meaning the everlasting one, the one who was and is to come, the one who's always present, the one who always is who he said he was, who's always consistent in how he deals with us, with people. Right? That's Exodus 34. Look at Exodus 34, verse 5. God telling us who he is there. I used this verse on Sunday as well, yesterday's message. God tells us who he is. This is him revealing himself to Moses. He says, I am. There's the I am. I am the Lord. I am the Lord. He says it twice. The merciful and gracious God. I am slow to anger and rich in unfailing love and faithfulness. I show this unfailing love to many thousands by forgiving every Yeshua. And it means God is salvation. God is salvation, right? That is the name. So when it says bless his name, praise his name, it's tell his story. You sing praises about his character. You sing praises about what he's done. You sing praises about who he is. You're singing praises about his character, his story. It says, proclaim the good news of his salvation day to day, the end of verse 2. Proclaim the good news of his salvation day to day. Can you find a much more evangelistic verse than that? Proclaim the good news of his salvation day to day. You know, that's specific, the New King James. The New English translation says, announce every day how he delivers. One of my favorite verses, and if you've ever got an email from me, on the bottom of my emails, I have Psalm 107, verse 2. It says, has the Lord redeemed you? Then speak out. Has the Lord redeemed you? Then speak out. It's that idea that we are to proclaim God's salvation, his deliverance, to tell other people about it. Verse 3 has the word declare in it. Other translations use the word tell, and it's emphatic. It says, go tell the world about God's glory and his wonders. Go tell the world about his splendor, his awe. Again, who is he talking to here? Us, you and I. For you and I to do that. Look again at verse 3. When is the mission of telling the world about God's glory complete? When are we off the hook? Right? When the entire world knows about God's glory. Until then, we're all responsible for that. Now, does that necessarily mean that we all have to pack up our bags and go to a foreign country that hasn't heard about God and do that? No, it doesn't. But if God's leading you to do that, then great, go do it. If God's not leading you to do that, and you're open to it, then get behind somebody that is. Help them with the costs, resources. Pray for them. Get behind missions somewhere where those people are going to tell the world about the glory of God. It's our responsibility for that to happen. Verses 4 through 6 tell us who this God is. Verse 4 says, great. I had that slide of Tony. I should have called for that earlier. Anybody remember what Tony the Tiger said? It's great, right? It's great. Yeah, well, we might have a slide. There's a Tony the Tiger with Frosted Flakes, right? I used to love Frosted Flakes. Now I get sick off of stuff like that. But he says, it's great. And our English word great, they're great. Is that what it is? Oh, there's the Ark of the Covenant. Can you go back to that for a second? I forgot to call for that. There's a replica of the Ark of the Covenant. It had to be big enough to at least hold Aaron's staff, right? So Aaron's staff, right? There were rods that they carried, and they had a staff as well, two different things. So it had to be at least big enough for that. So there's the poles that go through so that human hands, like the hands of sinful people, couldn't touch it. Remember the story when they were bringing the Ark of the Covenant back to Jerusalem, and the oxen stumbled, and one of the workers reached out to steady it, and instantly, boom, he died because, he touched the holiness of God. Just that the symbolism there, that sinful person cannot be in the presence of God without a covering. without their sins being covered. Right? That's the symbolism of that story. Go to the next picture. Right? They're great. They're great. Was that around before, like, 70s? Okay. A long time. All right. Well, those of you who answered just disclosed your age. Yeah. So, English, our English word for great is very narrow, right? It's great. We think of great, we think, oh, it's great. It's big, it's awesome, it's great. Listen to the Hebrew use of the word great. It includes the largest in magnitude, right? If you look at the word great in the Hebrews in the Old Testament, this is how it's used in other places. The largest in magnitude, the greatest in number, the most intense in power and strength, the loudest, the oldest, the most important, the most distinguished. So when he says God is great, it incorporates all of that. That there isn't anything better. There is no other God better in strength and power and in magnitude. Loudest, oldest, has been around the longest, the most important, the most distinguished. It incorporates all of that. And that's why he says, the God is great and greatly to be praised. Greatly to be praised, because he deserves our praise. The amazing things that he is and what he's done deserves our praise. 4b talks about other gods, other idols. It says he is to be feared above all gods. The word feared there means revered. The word literally means to stand in awe of. To stand in awe of. It's where we get the idea of God being awesome. If God is awesome, then we stand in reverence of him. We stand in fear of him. I know a pastor from when I was in college who would never use the word awesome except to describe God. Right? Just because he alone is awesome. You think about it. God alone is awesome. Nothing else in the world is. We use the word awesome for everything else. But the original context, original meaning is God alone is awesome. Verse 4 is saying there's no comparison between the greatness of God and the other things that we allow to be gods in our life. There's no comparison at all. Can you turn that off? Thank you. Verse 5 says, for all the gods of the people are idols, but the Lord made the heavens. Now, I was studying for this, and I was looking at what this word, what the Hebrew word for idol means, and when I read what it meant, and I don't remember hearing this before, I started weeping this morning. I started weeping. It moved me to tears. The word idol in Hebrew means worthless. Think about that. It means worthless. The root word for idol means nothing. Has a value of nothing. I started thinking about all the things in my life that I have valued, that I've placed before God, and they're worthless in comparison to God. If you have an idol in your life, it means that you are valuing something that is worthless. Hold it up against how great God is. See if it doesn't have the value of zero, of nothing. That's why God says, have no idols. Why? Because in comparison to him, they're worthless. What worthlessness do you have in your life that you've put before the real true God? What worthlessness do you have hidden somewhere in your life that you're trying to hide or keep hidden? What worthlessness in your life don't you want a light shine on so it stays hidden? It's all worthless. Verse 6, it says, honor and majesty are before him. Strength and beauty are in his sanctuary. This poetry is hard to translate, so I'm just going to read it from a couple different translations, just a caption, New English translation says, majestic splendor emanates from him. His sanctuary is firmly established and beautiful. The New Living Translation says, as soon as I get there. New Living Translation says, honor and majesty surround him. Strength and beauty are in his sanctuary. Just this sense of just this beauty, this splendor that just emanates from him, just comes from him. Verses 7 through 10 outlines what an appropriate response to God's greatness is. What an appropriate response from the nations should be. Talks about, verse 7 says, give to the Lord, O families of the people. Give to the Lord glory and strength. The idea of families of the people, the families of nations, as it says in another translation. Think about that. There's people in families who have relationship with God. Right? And the joy of the Lord, the praise of the Lord for who he is, right, that collectively makes a family. And families touching families collectively makes a nation. And that's how God is spread. The contagiousness about God is spread that way. Those that have a relationship with God, those who know who he is, those that know how great he really is, right? It spreads to all nations, where then a nation is responding. Nations of the world recognize the Lord. Recognize that the Lord is glorious and strong. But is that realistic? Is it realistic that all nations could do that? Well, look at Revelation 7, verse 9. Revelation chapter 7, verse 9. It says, after this I saw a vast crowd, too great to count, from every nation and tribe and people and language, standing in front of the throne and before God. And they were clothed in white and held palm branches in their hands. And they were shouting with a mighty shout, salvation comes from our God on the throne and from the Lamb. Right? They're singing praise to God, to Jesus. Right? Every tribe, nation, tongue, people group, all there. Right? They're all there. Is this a picture of the millennial kingdom, of what happens there? Perhaps. Yes, that's what's going on. But it doesn't take away from our responsibility here to share with all the nations about who God is and his greatness. Verse 8 says, give to the Lord the glory due his name. Bring an offering and come into his courts. Give to the Lord. Other translations use the word ascribe to the Lord. Ascribe has this idea that you designate giving where it rightfully belongs. Right? To give something is just give it to them, but ascribe means that this is where it should go. This is where praise should go. You ascribe to God. You give him the praise because it's where it rightfully should be. Right? Give him what it's due. So how do we respond to him? Verse 8 talks about as well about bringing an offering and coming to his courts. The word here that's used for offering, the Hebrew word, means bloodless sacrifice of thanksgiving. Think about that. A bloodless sacrifice of thanksgiving. Meaning you're not taking an animal like through the Levitical priesthood. You're not taking an animal and sacrificing it to God to please God that way. You are giving a sacrifice of thanksgiving, right? Of yourself to God. It costs you something from your life. That can be praise, that can be thanksgiving, that can be something else in your life, but you're giving a bloodless sacrifice of thanksgiving to God. Comes back to focus. Comes back to where your thanksgiving, your praise should be. Verse 9 says, "O worship the Lord in the beauty of his holiness." Worship. The Hebrew word for worship is to be, make yourself prostrate on the ground, not prostate. Prostrate on the ground, right? Be pretty humbling if you made yourself prostate. Would prostrate, meaning face on the ground, right? To worship God is that you know your place in front of the greatness of God. And our place is humility, face on the ground. You think about this, I've shared this here before. You think about what it means to be your face on the ground. It means that you can't get any lower without being dead. If you're dead, you're under the ground. You can't get any lower without being dead. Your face is on the ground. So when you are laying on the ground in worship, you put yourself in the lowest place that you can because you're in front of the person who is the greatest of all. That's God. So worship. Put yourself, humble yourself there. This idea of beauty of his holiness. Spurgeon says this. I had to read this a couple of times to get it, and I might still not have got it because it's Spurgeon. But Spurgeon says, "The fear of God is the blush upon the face of holiness, enhancing its beauty." Blush meaning makeup. Let me read it again. "The fear of God is the blush upon the face of holiness, enhancing its beauty." Right? That God is so holy, right? That our standing in awe of him, it's what the relationship was intended to be. That our standing in awe of him adds, not that we need to add anything to God, but it shows who he is, right? It demonstrates to people around us who God is. When we have that much awe for God, when we have that much reverence for him, it makes somebody around us stop and look like, who's he talking about? Who is this person that he gives so much reverence to, so much awe to? Well, it's God. Verse 10 speaks of continuing a nation's appropriate response to God. It says, "The Lord reigns. Say among the nations, the Lord reigns. The world also is firmly established." The Lord reigns. It's you and I saying, making this personal, that God is king of my life. He's king of your life. Do you acknowledge that the Lord reigns? Is he king? Is he Lord of your life? Verses 11 and 12 says, "Let the heavens rejoice. Let the earth be glad. Let the sea roar in all its fullness. Let the fields be joyful and all that is in it. Then all the trees of the woods will rejoice before the Lord, for he is coming. He's coming to judge the earth." It has this Narnian feel to it, right? About animals that can speak and talk, trees that can, like Middle Earth for Tolkien, where trees can have, can talk and speak. It has that kind of that feel to it. It's this sense that all of creation, right? Us as individuals, families give praise to God, nations give praise to God, and all of creation worships God, right? That trees are waving their arms in praise and adoration of God. It has that feel to it, right? That everything in the forest, the trees, the brush, the undergrowth, the animals, all singing praise to God. Talks about the sea giving praise to God and all the creatures of the sea giving praise to God. That all of creation recognizes its creator. All of creation recognizes the greatness of God. Verse 13 says, "For he is coming. He's coming to judge the earth. He shall judge the world with righteousness and the peoples with his truth." He's coming. Was this prophetic about Jesus' first coming? As the Messiah, as a baby, going to the cross, was this prophetic about him coming, established in the millennial kingdom? The answer is yes to both. Right? The word here for judge means govern, as in supreme rule, and that he's going to judge, he's going to govern fairly, he's going to govern where it's going to govern, what's the word that uses here, with world with righteousness, the people of truth. The New English translation uses the word judge. He will judge fairly in the nations in accordance with his justice, right? That based on his character, based on the justice of the just who he is, right, is how he will judge the world around him. We are accountable to this Creator. Each one of us is accountable to him in his greatness. So what is your response to him? What's your response? Are you prostrate? Are you prostrate before him in your heart? Are you humbled before him? And from that place, can you give him the praise he deserves? Can you ascribe to him the praise he deserves? Marissa, if you can turn the projector on, get ready for the last video. Thank you. See, the appropriate response of creation is to worship the Creator. And that's what this psalm is about. It's our worship of God and who he is. We're going to play a song here that's from Song 96. It has a Hebrew-sounding, a Hebrew-sounding music to it. It's called Sing Unto the Lord. It's from the first two verses. It incorporates then verse 4 in that as well.